Hi. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about voices breaking, which is something I particularly get asked about fairly frequently by folks who are taking testosterone and are finding that their voice is changing. So this idea that our voices break, it's kind of the main thing I want to do today is actually put this in some context. Because it's this very specific way of thinking about how people's voices change, which isn't necessarily always accurate. So our kind of popular vision of what happens when someone's voice gets lower during puberty, whether that's a first puberty, a second puberty, kind of whatever variety of puberty this is that you go from talking like this to talking like this. And sometimes you kind of oscillate between the two of them very quickly and somewhat embarrassingly within the same sentence. Now, having worked with quite a lot of young people and having worked with and been friends with quite a lot of people taking testosterone, my observation, and this lines up with other people's observations, is that actually that kind of extreme and dramatic variability within the same sentence doesn't occur that frequently. So where's it come from? Well, it's something that people in music worry about a lot. Especially in traditions where you've got kind of boy choristers in like cathedral choirs, for instance, where we can't have women in the choir, so we need to have children who sing the high bits, and often being a chorister comes with a prestigious place of education, music tuition. You get kind of perks. And yeah, so, and there's this idea that kind of once your voice changes, you don't actually know whether you're going to be any good at singing anymore. So people worry about the kind of that time within that institution coming to an end. So historically, we've had this thing where, and also because actually, when you're coming up to that age, you will have amassed quite a lot of experience of singing, so kind of choir leaders don't necessarily want you to go because you are good and experienced at what you do by that stage. So kind of it's like there's this mutual pattern that people fall into of wanting to keep singing the same part, or to keep a chorister singing on the same part, which means keeping people singing a high part for as long as they possibly can. So what you're trying to get someone to do is you're trying to get their range to stay like this. However, their voice, this kind of in terms of what it's doing without being told, is kind of sloping downwards. So it's getting kind of harder and harder actually for them to maintain that same performing range. And it gets to a point where basically your muscles are like, no, I can't do this anymore. And it's kind of at that point you suddenly get this quite dramatic change because, you've been kind of really giving it your all to keep this up, and then body says no. And that's kind of a thing that is described a bit like a break. There is also just variety from person to person, how dramatic versus how gradual a change of voice is, but the way voices have been treated, particularly, and I'm using this musical example, so maybe there's other examples as well, but it's particularly strong here. The way it's been socialized is, you keep at this high voice, and then that's gone, and you have to start over. But kind of literature advice is it would do that a lot of the time. So kind of with this background of doing this thing, like, trying to keep pushing your voice, think about like any other muscle in your body. If you've been training for some kind of sporting event, and then you do the event and you kind of ease off, you don't then, having eased off for a month, say, oh no, actually tomorrow I'm going to do the same level of event again. Because your muscles have changed. And I mean, it's not a totally accurate metaphor because that's to do with training, whereas this is a change that is happening regardless of training. But the kind of result remains the same, is that if you're doing something, your muscles and your body parts are not kind of in the right condition for anymore, or are not kind of the right shape or size for anymore, it's far more likely that you're going to get hurt. Because as with everything in our body, like voices and vocal production comes with muscles, and lovely sounding things like vocal folds and all of that stuff, and these things can get hurt. So there is also a school of thought within singing teachers that actually we should not be pushing people to stay at the same pitch when actually kind of their voice is doing this, because you're going to get hurt. And I feel like there's potentially something we can learn from this. So okay, well, maybe if we can't do that, what can we do? And what I've read about from this alternative school of thought is that actually, if we're trying not to hurt our voice while it's going through these gradual shifts, the thing to do is not to be thinking about extending your range. There's this whole idea that having a massive range is very impressive. All right, maybe it is, but when your voice is changing, it's going to be a time when your range is going to be changing, and it's going to be because that kind of that ground is shifting, that middle bit, that point of reference is shifting. It's going to be very much easier to injure yourself. So what can we do instead of this? Well, two thoughts. Firstly, finding things to sing, repertoire to explore, which can shift in range, so things that can be transposed. Most things can be transposed. It's just seen as more acceptable in some circles than others. It could be, so you could, even do it with just a popular song that maybe it was in E, and you used to find that comfortable, but now that's just kind of high. See if it's easier in A. It might take a bit of getting used to thinking about, okay, what do I do to move this into a different key? But actually, if you go to a lot of the chord sites, do have little buttons down at the bottom where you can kind of click up one or down one. And if you think of it like a guitar fretboard, that's kind of like moving up a fret or down a fret. When it comes to a guitar, the capo is also your friend, and then you can even use the same chord patterns. So that's one thing. The other thing is concentrating on repertoire with a small mid-range range. And in this case, mid-range means kind of the middle of the kind of human voice range writ large, like an area which actually tends to be in nearly everyone's range. So for some people, the mid-range will be near the top of their range. Some people, it will be near the bottom. Some people, it will be in the middle of their individual range as well. Lucky them. So that, and the idea is that is something that will remain a part of your range while your voice is changing. And, you may think, oh, well, that's going to be easy to having a really small range. Well, no, not necessarily. There's other aspects to singing and to vocal production. You could be, excuse me, you could be thinking about, you could be exploring tone. Tone is a really good thing to explore. And if you're not thinking about range, it means that there's less thought going there, so you can really hone in on what do I do with my body that makes the voice I have sound good. How do I support myself? You might be working with really tricky pitch intervals if you want to be technical about it. You might be experimenting with different techniques, provided they're not things that really interfere with stuff like range. So, maybe that's a bit more of a danger area. Maybe that's more of something to take some advice on. You might be working on diction or on performance skills. So there's loads of other things that you can be working on, and that will continue to serve you well, kind of once your voice has settled down again and found its new home, its new kind of home ground. So yeah, there's still stuff you can do without the same level of risk of hurting your voice, because in the long term, the amount of time it's going to take for your voice to recover if you really hurt those muscles is longer than what you're going to gain by trying to force it to do something that it's no longer quite in the right place for. And I bet that if you do look after it, kind of somewhere further down the line, you'll find some way of adapting what you were doing before, so you can kind of do the same but different again. So it's a bit of patience, it's a bit of thinking about, well, maybe that's going to hurt, but hey, is there something else I can concentrate on? And thinking about what can you do as well as what can't you do. Okay. And I guess the other point of what I was saying was, this idea that voices break. That's kind of a socially constructed thing as well. And it's useful to think just more widely about voices changing. And that also contextualizes it within the broader sense of it's not just puberty that's when our voices change. Throughout life, things happen that make our voices change, whether it's illness, whether it's age. Just everyone's voices change when they get older as well. There's not just one period in our life when our voices change. So, and I find that really normalizes that voice change can take place throughout your life. I have waffled on a bit now, so I think I'm going to leave it there. See you again next time. Bye for now.